Hi, I'm Elaine Lisle, and this is my exhibit at Gross McCleaf Gallery. It's called Fall in Philadelphia.
On September 9th, I attended Elaine's art opening. Her show will dazzle your eye and warm your heart.
Capturing the light is always my primary goal. It always is what draws me to a subject. It is one reason why I prefer the colors of the late afternoon and the early morning, and also the fall season, where the light is more intense and warmer than in the spring and summer. I love to paint and I enjoy the process, but part of my process is also about bringing that joy to the viewer.
My name's Tom Reese, and my wife Josephine and I have a number of Elaine's paintings, and we love the light and warmth and freshness that they bring to our house. All have bright colors that leap out at you, particularly on a cloudy day. It's just wonderful to come home and see the paintings.
I'm Jim Harity. I'm a good friend of John and Elaine. We have 3 of Elaine's paintings, and I just love her colors, her bright colors, and her bold strokes, and they're wonderful.
You came all the way from Colorado?
I sure did, to see Elaine's opening, absolutely.
And what made it worth traveling all that distance?
The combination of the beauty of my friend Elaine and the beauty of her work. I love her colors, her lighting, her interpretation of what she sees. I have a couple of her paintings in my home. I'm thrilled to be here. I know Elaine for 30 years, by the way, and Elaine is wonderful inside and out, and the way she relates to people is reflected in her paintings also.
I love the urban landscape, the interplay between architecture, trees, and people going about their daily lives. My goal in portraying people is to help the viewer to connect to the painting and to feel as if they are there in the moment. When I was younger, I often took very large canvases into the street and always painted directly from life. I spent an entire summer working in the Italian market. Now I'm much more likely to work on small plein air pieces on site and then produce much larger works in the studio from these reference sketches. I often will take pictures of people when I see somebody really interesting that I want to put in my painting. Once I have chosen a subject for a large studio piece, I might take additional photos and visit the site a few times while I work on the canvas in the studio. Typically, I start with an umber wash and then gradually broaden my palette as I work in layers. I'm pushing myself to develop more texture with my paint application as well. This show is primarily Philadelphia, including places that are close to the city like French Creek. This painting is the back of Independence Hall. I'm always looking for an actual composition that works, and I loved the yellow trees. I did a small sketch on site. It gave me enough to work with. And then I worked on a larger one, which required a couple more trips down there. Oranges and yellows are my favorite colors to focus on. The yellow becomes even more yellow, and the orange more orange because of the blue sky. This was like a moment at the end of the fall. Perfect day, perfect light. This painting is called Loftiest Perch. If you look, you see William Penn on top of City Hall, and back when I first came to Philadelphia, no building was allowed to be built above William Penn's hat. Of course, now that's no longer the case, and I found this spot where you could see William Penn and the Comcast Center, which is the tallest building now in Philadelphia. And I just thought it was a great juxtaposition of the two extremes because it shows how much the city has grown. Well, I love Rittenhouse Square. To me, it is the heart of the city. Back when I was at the academy, I lived a few blocks from Rittenhouse, and I used to go sketch in the square all the time. It's got a little bit of everything. Always great people. I've painted the benches many times. What stuck out to me was that red tree right in the perfect place and that sycamore right next to it. I just love the sycamores in Philadelphia. I've painted the Philadelphia skyline so many times, and when I started this painting, I really intended to make it very loose. It sort of took on a mind of its own, and everything changed. It's funny because the water actually is pretty abstract, but the city itself is quite detailed. I also love water as a subject matter. I love the challenge of capturing the reflections in the water, which are even more compelling in the fall.
Elaine has traveled extensively and creates art wherever she goes.
I've painted in Ireland, and I love to go up to Maine, and I went up to the Adirondacks on a painting trip this past June, and there's a couple paintings from that in this exhibit. There's also a painting of the center of Charlottesville. I've gone several times to France. I painted in Provence and also the southwest of France, where I also led a workshop a couple years ago.
And you came from France?
Yes, I came from Toulouse in France because my friend is my oldest friend. We were pen pals when we were 14 years old, so I wanted to see for the first time the exhibition.
And thanks to Elaine's marvelous friend Chantal, nous avons une petite vidéo à la studio.
Bonjour Hélène.
Bonjour Chantal.
Comment ça va? Tu vas travailler?
Oui.
Oh, it's nice.
I have a studio at home now. I used to rent a studio in Manayunk, and then when my kids moved out, I took over the family room. It's not a huge space, but it's very adequate, and I have a nice big wall that I can work up against, because a lot of times I like to work straight against the wall, and I tend to put my sketches and photos around what I'm working on for reference. I also have a nice easel that I can manage large paintings, moving them up and down. I have some good storage space, my little tool tabouret, and I have a nice work table, which also serves as a table for still life setups. This is my palette table, the way it looks after I've been painting for a while. I use a fairly limited number of colors out of the tube. I use graham oils, which are solvent-free, poppy seed oil and walnut oil instead of solvents, which I really like.
Elaine told me about some of the people who made it possible for her to live a creative life.
I remember as a young girl deciding that I wanted to be an artist. One of my earliest influences was my grandfather, Russell Barnes, a landscape architect, and he loved to sketch and draw, and he encouraged me to keep at it when he saw my early attempts to draw and paint the landscape. I went on to study art at the University of Pennsylvania, and then, after working in mental health as an art and activities therapist, I studied painting at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. I had wonderful teachers at both places who inspired me and encouraged me to focus on the urban landscape. At the Academy, I was fortunate to study with Sidney Goodman and Jimmy Luters. Murray Desner was also a great mentor, and even though my work is nothing like his, he was always able to communicate with me in a way that kept me focused and helped me to continue to improve. Neil Welliver was the head of the department at Penn, a realist artist who had his own unique vision, and he made it okay to want to be a realist at a time when the entire art world seemed to be going abstract. I've always been inspired by the Impressionists, of course, and living in Philadelphia, I loved having access to the Philadelphia Art Museum and the Barnes collections, particularly getting to see so many of Cézanne's works. Many years later, when I first went to France to paint in Provence, I visited Cézanne's studio, and I looked for his views of Mont Sainte-Victoire, a place that he painted over and over again. And I also relate to the artists of the Ashcan School, William Glackens and John French Sloan, as well as George Bellows. They were all urban realists whose works resonate with me.
Elaine also mastered a method of working very directly on location.
Plein air painting is a very important part of my process, and I have participated in a number of competitions and paint-outs recently.
These plein air competitions, what's that like? It sounds like that could be a fun documentary for me.
Yeah. Oh, yes. It's a great experience. You think of artists as being very competitive with each other, but they're also very supportive of each other. You develop this camaraderie with the group, and everybody's friends on Facebook, and they post their stuff. I think it really helped me improve my work, too.
So people don't accidentally bump into your painting. Oh, I'm sorry, I guess it got ruined. It's in the mud.
No, I didn't have that experience. It's more the opposite. When somebody's painting gets covered with sand or whatever, everybody's so helpful. Oh, that's terrible. Did you hear what happened to so-and-so?
I have the tweezers. Let's start picking out the grains of sand.
Right.
Well, speaking of supportive and helpful people, Elaine's opening was filled with them.
I'm Cheryl Cheston. I've known Elaine for a long time. I love that Elaine has gotten better and better and better and better, and I hope she becomes a superstar.
I'm Ann Jarvis Gerbner, and I've known Elaine since our freshman year at college.
Did she have good study habits?
I think she was naturally very smart and knew how to study wisely.
Was she a wild child, or did she deport herself in a goodly manner?
Always, and she always had fun, both at the same time.
That sounds like Elaine. I mean, I've known Elaine a couple decades, maybe. She feels like my sister, what can I say?
My name is Heather Lisle. I am Elaine's daughter.
Did she neglect you in favor of art as you were growing up?
I would say no, never. In fact, I remember we did a portrait session where I had to sit at age 5 or so while my mom painted a portrait of me, and I was, well, bored. But I've always loved coming and doing my own paintings next to Mom and stuff like that.
I'm John Lisle, husband of the artist. The artwork is different than what most people assume it is. It's hard, sometimes tedious work. She told me last July that she was very pleased that she got this solo show. The only thing is it's going to be a whole lot of work. I didn't say anything, but I thought, you got 14 months to paint painting. Come on. And then I watched her, and she worked 5 days a week to 7 days a week for 12 months. So it requires a whole lot of discipline and perseverance. Her paintings seem to get more and more remarkable to me as she continues.
I've always had a tendency to challenge myself by looking for very complicated compositions. And sometimes I ask myself, why did I make this so complicated? But then it feels very satisfying when I'm able to bring it to a successful conclusion. If you ask me what it means to be an artist, I simply don't know how to not be a painter. Everything I see, I examine in terms of whether it is something I should paint. And I think it's the only way I know how to be.